Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that focuses on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Wednesday morning, political fighters. Welcome to the July 1st, 2026 edition. Happy July 1st, everybody. Henry, happy July 1st. Mike, happy July 1st. It is, wow, 6 months in, guys. 6 months into the year. So let's make the next 6 months extraordinary for all of us. Let's do everything we can to stay connected, to reach out to people, make sure you know where your folks are. All of our players means all of our players. Both obviously on a political level and a social level and economics with regards to the things that we talk about here, but make sure that that's happening in your personal and your professional lives. Let's get connected with the folks that we care about. Please, please, please make that part of your second half of 2026's goal and plan. Catch up. Find my show, of course, on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, and YouTube. Of course, our number is 773-763-9278, and we will be getting your calls in today. We got our question of the day, and I'm going to probably poke the bear a little bit, and I mean that in the most positive of ways. Email me at richard@wcpt820.com and follow me on all the socials under Choose Views. Catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. There you can get Choose Views featured interviews, Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, the great Petty Vasquez, Driving It Home, It's the Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other shows and interviews. Also in the evenings, the Politics Bar, the Matt McNeil Show, and the Gailey Show are our evening programs that you want to check out. We had a really interesting call yesterday from one of our listeners, Mary Pat, that said something that I want to put into we're going to capture this somehow, Mike and Henry. And what she said is, essentially, don't make excuses not to vote. And I had a couple people reach out to me that said that's really something that we should capture, and we should be promoting that message more. So I'm going to, we're going to work on that, and we'll put something together, because it was really not just positive, but very mindful from Mary Pat. Don't, stop finding excuses not to vote. That was, I thought, pretty cool. Over at our heartlandsignal.com digital platform, a couple of good articles. U.S. Representative Mark Pocan really torches Russell Vought. You guys should have seen it for not answering about the USAID. And, yesterday we had Representative book author, I guess you could say former executive with USAID, and Nicholas Einrich. And he really brought the news with this book, whistleblower book. So, make your way over to Heartland Signal so you can grab our articles. One of the quotes from this one with Representative Mark Pocan from Wisconsin is that he said to Russell Vought, "Don't dance. You're not a tap dancer." I love that. Don't dance. You are not a tap dancer. He's trying, and Russell Vought is doing everything he can to skirt around these issues. He is the head of the Office of Management and Budget, and one of the most influential people in this cabinet, because he has the ability to determine, and I'm giving the everyday person's version of, he has the ability to determine where money goes. Okay, money that's been allocated, approved, he still has the ability to put his thumb on the scale. And if it's in the process of being approved, same thing there. He has the ability to put his thumb on the scale. And he is taking a nap on the scale right now when it comes to making sure that monies that should be going to different programs that have been, where the monies have been allocated, that they actually go. So good on Representative Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, and check out that clip at our Heartland Signal website digital platform. Make your way over there. On today's show, we will be taking calls, some more America at 250 calls. And the past 2 days, we talked about 200 to 250 on Monday. Henry. 1976 was our 200th anniversary, and this Saturday is our 250th. So the question is, what have been the things that have made us great or moved us forward? Have we moved forward? Yes or no? That was a question that that we had out there. From 200th birthday in 1976 to now, the 250th birthday, what have been the pros and cons in America in those 50 years? We still want to hear your answers to that. If you didn't get a chance to send it to us or call in with that on Monday, that was our question on Monday. Yesterday's question was based on the past 50 years to now. Currently, do you think we will have a 300th birthday in celebration of our democracy? That was yes. He's like, That was our question yesterday. So we want you to chime in there in both cases. And today's question, which I'll get to in a second. Let me tell you about today's guest first. Professor Kevin Schultz, who is the chair of the Department of History at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He will be with us, and we'll be talking about, and we'll be talking with Jane Kirtley, also a professor, who is really steeped in conversation around the history of media, the history of communication. So I'll be looking forward to talking with both of them in the 7 o'clock hour. And then in the 7:30 hour, Professor Schultz is going to stick around with us because we'll be talking with Gloria Browne-Marshall, also a professor, law professor, and talking about protest. She's written a bestseller on the subject of protest in America. So between the three of them and myself, we will cover communications and media and protesting as a part of the U.S. history is our kind of our final segment of America at 250. But our question for today, as we keep this moving forward, is this. Again, staying on the theme of what we see as America at 250. So today's question is, we the people, if you think about that, we the people, those are the lead words, lead language, lead sentence. Some of our, one of our most important, many people say the most important document that we have. But we the people, what can or should we be doing to assure that we the people are still what matters in this country? So again, we the people, the opening line, opening words. What can or should we be doing to make sure, to assure that we the people are still what matters most in this country? Want to hear your thoughts? Certainly send me an email at richard@wcpt820.com, a text at 773-763-9278. And we'd love to hear from you today by phone because we're going to keep the lines open all during the show. In this next 45 minutes or so of the show until 7 o'clock, I'll be taking your calls directly before our guests come on. So make sure that you dial us up and let us know what you think. Plus, I'm going to throw a couple other things at you that might poke the proverbial bear of current events. So make your way over to heartlandsignal.com to check out our articles and posts there. And we'd like to hear from you on our questions of the week. Monday's question, yesterday, and certainly today's question, we the people. What can or should we be doing to assure that we the people are still what matters most in this country? So let us, and also make sure you leave your comments and thoughts at our Facebook page so we can read those on the air. Hopefully we can get to that. But I'd love to hear from you by phone today. Give us a call and tell us your thoughts. But those are our guests. Again, Professor Kevin Schultz, professor of history at UIC, author of also the bestseller, Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, Including White Liberals. I got to tell you a story about the book for a second that just kind of blew me away. You guys may remember last fall in October, I took a few days off and I went to Canada. My wife and I went to Canada. And we had a driving trip from Eastern Canada to Central Canada, which was just a blessing and so eye-opening and so receptive from the Canadians, which was, at that time we were in a slightly different environment with the administration in Canada. Great trip. But I grabbed a book review publication in where were we in Canada when I grabbed this? I grabbed it from a kind of a convenience store newsstand in Quebec. And guess whose book was on the bestseller list or the book and review to read? It was Professor Kevin Schultz's book, Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, Including White Liberals. That one, I was like, that's pretty sweet. But Jane Kirtley, who's a professor of media and ethics and law at the University of Minnesota, will be joining us as well at 7 o'clock. And as I said, Gloria Browne-Marshall, professor, writer, author, will be joining us in the 7:30 hour. So looking forward to talking with them about media and about protests in America. Let's take a quick break, guys. The number is 773-763-9278. You are listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and 1520 AM and 103.5 FM. That's WARR in Warren County, North Carolina, and the progressive voice of Minnesota, AM 950. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you are just tuning in, I am Richard Chu, and thanks for being with us on this July 1st, 2026. That means that we've made it halfway through the year, and as I said earlier, let's stay on point, guys. Let's stay connected. Let's stay fighting with each other rather than against each other. But let me bring you a couple of quick Choose Views news items, and then we'll hit some of the topics of the day. SCOTUS upholds birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court has affirmed that all people born in the United States are citizens, regardless of their parents' citizenship or residency. The 6-3 ruling invalidates the executive order issued by Donald Trump on the first day of his second term, which attempted to limit citizenship only to those born to U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents. The justices also ruled against Trump on Monday, as you recall, allowing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook to remain in her position. And in February, when they overthrew the administration's sweeping tariffs. So the Supreme Court's getting a lot in because, they're getting ready to go on break. Job openings beat forecast in May, but hiring plateaus. Some 7.6 million jobs were up for grabs in May, exceeding estimates and comparable to numbers in April, according to new government data. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg were expecting 7.3 million open positions. The numbers are an indication of steady, continuing labor demand. Construction, wholesale trade, and leisure roles saw increases. Healthcare openings dipped, and finance-related openings tumbled for a second straight month. Hiring layoffs and the quits rate were largely stable per the data released. Oil swings towards potential surpluses based on the reopening of the Straits of Hormuz. According to Bloomberg analysts and according to Morgan Stanley, the price of dated Brent, which measures physical transactions, is expected to dip from $90 to $75 in the upcoming third quarter before dropping to $70 by the end of the next year. Prices are falling on optimism over the peace talks, increased U.S. production, and weak Chinese demand. So there you go. It's happening. We'll see how much time it takes. The court rejects the Meta bid to dismiss the child safety case, and a federal court denied Meta's bid to drop the case brought about by 29 states that accuse the company of designing its social media platforms to addict minors. The judge granted summary judgment to the states on the issue of Meta's failure to comply with the federal Children's Online Privacy Protection Act's notice and parental consent requirements. In March, a jury found Meta and YouTube liable for harming the mental health of a young user via addictive design features. Last but not least, some people may like this, some people may not, but at the end of the day, LeBron James will play his 24th NBA season. That's pretty astonishing. First of all, 24 seasons. I know people got issues with players who go different teams, but it's a business. He's leaving the Lakers. LeBron will return for a 24th NBA season at age 42. But he won't be playing for the Purple and Gold. Future Hall of Famer informed the Lakers he will not rejoin them, according to multiple reports, ending an 8-year run that included a 2020 championship. James thanked the organization on social media. Focus now turns to his future. James could return to his native Cleveland for a third stint with the Cavaliers, or he could join frequent finals foe Steph Curry in Golden State. And they are trying to build a veteran team to get one more championship and then probably shut it down I have a loose opinion about it. People have criticized LeBron for, like, why not he didn't stick with one team. It's a business. People move around in jobs all the time, and nobody ever gets upset when a team trades a player. Henry, they get rid of a player, a couple players, great players, because they want to do something different. So, it cracks me up. And the generational shift in terms of how sports are run is always going to impact that. So there you go. Congratulations to LeBron James for 24 years in the NBA. I mean, that's hell on your body, Henry. You do something like that for 24 years. But kudos to him, kudos to his family, and other players who are still playing after years of being in the league. So there you go, guys. A couple of views, news items on July 1st, 2026. I always get excited and probably overtalk it, but that's just me when it comes to a new month, because it's kind of a rebirth. I mean, we celebrate certain things in a certain way, but a new month for me, means we made it. We made it through another number of days or weeks. And, the middle of the year is a sign that we've made it halfway through this year. Not that we're trying to rush anything or anything of that nature, but we should be proud of ourselves and be somewhat joyous of the fact that, particularly right now, with all the craziness and the hell that's going on, that's coming from this administration and other politicians in not only this administration, but in other places and other things that are going on, that we've made it through to the middle of the year. And we should be joyous in that. We should rejoice in that. We should feel good about that. We should find ways to celebrate that with the people that we care about and that we love, whether they be your family, your adopted family, your neighbors, your coworkers. Celebrate that, guys. I'm just telling you. Uncle Richard says celebrate that, because it's important that we, kind of slow down, take a little bit of a beat and go, okay, we're still here. We're still in this fighting. Is it Billy Joel's song, I'm Still Standing? Do I have that right, Mike? Yeah, I do. Okay. So we're still standing, y'all. We're still standing. And we sometimes have to look at, times of the year or certain times of the day, frankly, to acknowledge that. So that's all I'm doing, is just saying, let's acknowledge July 1st as a sign that we made it through this year, and we've been able to. It's Elton John. Thank you, man. I'm sorry. And Elton knows how much I love his music, so I'm sorry, Elton, about that. But at least I got the idea. Elton John, I'm Still Standing. I know there's a bunch of people going, chill, music. What the hell? Elton John, I'm Still Standing. We are still standing, and we should acknowledge that. So please take a moment today. It's July 1st, 2026. It's part of your celebration. Just take a pause. Look somebody in the eye that you know or you don't know, and tell them you appreciate them being in your life and that we're still standing. I think you might be surprised, and it might seem corny to say that to somebody that you work with or whatever the case may be, but I can assure you that it's going to help two people feel good. The one you said it to, who might think it's strange, and you for saying it to them. We're still standing. You might be going through some craziness at work, and somebody that you work with, a coworker, needs to hear that. You don't know, because everybody, this is, and I'm going to share this because of the congressman in New Jersey that has been kind of missing in action the last few weeks. And he said something that, and you guys know how I roll. Things go on. I catch, I grab, I'm like a sponge. I grab a lot of things that are going on, and then I go, okay, how do I want to further that message to the audience? So the reason I'm making a big deal about this is the congressman in New Jersey, and this takes partisan politics out of the equation for a moment. He's a Republican. He's been kind of MIA for the last few weeks, and everybody's been wondering, where in the hell is he? Even I said something about it a couple of weeks ago. Well, as it turns out, Mike, he was suffering from depression. And he was on the House floor yesterday, and he put his business on the street. And he said, this is what's been going on. I was diagnosed with depression, and I didn't know it, and that there were things that were happening that affected my life. And I want to let everybody know, and he even said, irrespective of politics or political, team that you're on, this is something that many people struggle with, suffer from in silence, in private. because they're embarrassed to talk about the fact that they might be going through depression. You could get injured or hurt or sick, and it's sick in a physical way or physiological way, and everybody knows it because they can see it. But sometimes that those mental challenges, which we all may, we're all susceptible to, whether we go through them or not, or to what extent we go through them is different. But none of us is immune to struggling with mental challenges, stress, on stress times 10 for whatever reason, for whatever source. So when I saw that, I thought about that, and I said, I got to speak to July 1st, and let's kind of draw the line in the sand for all of us with all that we deal with and all we fight and talk about. I just want to send that message out to everybody, anywhere you are in the country, that take a moment and look somebody in the eye and say, we're still standing. We're still here, and we're still going to fight, and we're still going to be here for each other. We're still going to make sure that whatever we're challenged by, that we can pull together in the worst and craziest of circumstances to make absolutely sure that we can check the box of caring for one another. And if you talk to people that way, I think what you'll find is that they may find it strange, but they appreciate you for doing it. So there you go. I wanted to get that in before we hit this break and let you guys know where I'm coming from in that space and that I care. And let's make the second half of 2026 as strong and as powerful as we possibly can. So we're going to hit a quick break, guys. The number is 773-763-9278. You are listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM, 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. And now AM 50, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chew. When we come back, I'm going to poke the bear a little bit on something I want to get you guys to talk a little bit about or give you my thoughts on it. Let's take a quick break, Mike. We'll be right back. Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, there you go. Glad to be back. Today on Live, Local, and Progressive, Joan Esposito will be taking your calls and talking to Bruce Rhymes, former CBS Los Angeles Deputy Bureau Chief, and David Lyman, former Providence, Rhode Island news anchor. Live, Local, and Progressive, that is Joan Esposito, weekdays 2 to 5 here on WCPT, AM 820, heartlandsignal.com, and TuneIn. Tonight on Driving It Home, Patty Vasquez will be joined by co-host Ken Mejia Beal. And their in-studio guest includes Steve Goody, comedian and singer-songwriter. Christian Mitchell, former Illinois State Representative and Deputy Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration, and 2026 candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, weekdays 5 to 7 here on WCPT. I can see the calls are already starting to come in, so we'll make sure we have ourselves ready for that. 5 to 7 is, of course, Patty's Showtime, heartlandsignal.com. Tune in, YouTube, and Facebook. So check out Patty. Always check out Patty. It's a good way to wrap up your day. Tomorrow, speaking of Patty's, on Choose Views, my guests include Patty Garcia, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 4th District here in Illinois. She'll join me here in studio. Friday on the show, I'll talk to Karen Byrne and Kurt Mullet. That's going to be fun, the two of them together. Oh, my goodness. Looking forward to having those two guys hang out with me on Friday. And then Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson will be here to talk about what's happening here in the city of Chicago. Daniel Squadron, president and co-founder of Future Now, and author of The Fourth Branch, How State Government Can Save Our Union. You'll want to tune in for all of those shows and interviews. And, of course, speaking of interviews, Choose Views, featured interviews, and full episodes are available on podcast, as you hear from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Search Choose Views. You can get all of the podcasts there, heartlandsignal.com/podcast. So make your way over there. All right. Let me dive in. I said I was going to poke the bear a little bit, and we're going to grab some calls in a second. But let me first do a couple of let me first bring a couple things to the table. And so the question of the day is, we the people, what can or should we be doing to assure that we the people are still what matters in the United States? I'm going to read some of your texts because those are coming in. I can see your calls coming in. So let me get to something I want to say about a couple of things. First of all, kudos, Colorado. They're having their in some ways, their Mondami moment, that the progressive Democratic Socialist, quote, candidates are making noise, and it's outside of New York City. Pay attention, y'all. Dr. Saeed in Michigan and others in different parts of the country are really hitting their stride right now. And like I've said so many times, I want us to win the seats. And if we've got people who are going to push the envelope and knock over some tables, as I've said so many times, in doing that, that's what we need right now, because that's what the voters are saying that they want. So pay attention. All right, the SAVE Act. Let me talk about this from I'm just going to say from maybe a unique perspective on the SAVE Act. Here's there's three groups that really are impacted by this in a very, very destructive way to our country and our democracy. Our military. You guys are familiar with this to a great extent. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois posted a really interesting thing yesterday regarding the SAVE Act and as it relates to the military. Military IDs will not be valid for you to be able to vote. Neither will your real ID. Think about that for a second. So why are the party that says that they care about the military and our troops, what you're saying is you don't want them to have their voice be important and valid? That's what it sounds like to me. Another group that obviously we talked about on a number of occasions, and this is the one that seems to rise to the top in terms of the groups the group that is most likely going to be affected if this were to go through, and that happens to be, of course, American women. Think about this: if you have a different name on your birth certificate than that's on your driver's license, you may not be able to, or you based on these rules, cannot vote. So that's about 69 million American women who took their husband's name. You would not be able to vote. And let me just play this out. And this is where where I said I'm probably going to poke the bear a little bit for people that may not like the way I phrase this. All right, I'm just going to say it. So 69 million women who've taken their husband's name would potentially not be able to vote. One of the architects of the SAVE Act and from a belief system around who should be able to vote and who should have a voice is Alex Karp and his boy, Peter Thiel, from none other than Palantir. They're not believers in American democracy. I'm not saying something that would get me in trouble. They've said it. They said it out loud. They posted it. They've talked about it. So they can just kick rocks in terms of me saying something that they didn't say. Peter Thiel likes to play that game to find what people say and see if he can use it as a way to go after them. You said it. Your boy Alex represents the company. So there you go. Where am I going with this? They've used language that said that they don't really think that women should have a place at the table when it comes to democracy and voting. And that their programs, their technological programs, they're designing them to basically hold women back, to put the brakes on successful women in the workplace, in business, in politics. That says 69 million women potentially as well. And Peter Thiel, who happens to not be, from what he's made public, is not straight. He's gay. So I'm not making a statement about that. I'm just making a statement about kind of this weird hypocrisy. You guys see what I'm saying? It's just a weird hypocrisy. This is where I said I would be slightly poking the bear. We just came off of Pride Week and Pride Month and Pride Parades. But that's just kind of it's not congruent. You would think that he'd be like, yeah, we want to make sure that all folks can vote. But no. So I question his preferences sometimes because what he says isn't congruent with what should be right for humanity. And the same thing with Alex Karp. But there you go. And then the third group, which not a lot of people talk about, are folks who are from adopted or part of an adopted family. Because that name may definitely not be the name that you were born with. Right, Henry? You know, let's just play this out. Mary and John Smith adopt a young boy or girl, and their birth name was Johnson, but they took on the name of Smith. Right? You guys with me on that? Not a lot of people talk about that in terms of the adopted part of our society or community, our adopted families. So what we have to do, guys, is galvanize and shut this garbage down, the SAVE Act. We have to make sure that Donald Trump does not get what he wants in this space, because it makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever for us to be, you know, I almost said a bad word, but piddling around with this SAVE Act, the Save America Act. Listen, folks on the right, if you want to save America, get rid of Donald Trump and his whole political ideology. If we want to save the country, let's get rid of him politically so that nobody loses their damn mind. Oh, Chu said cause harm to Donald. No, I didn't. I said let's get rid of him politically and all of his people. And at the front of the line, even in front of Donald Trump is, and this is my little pivot to birthright citizenship, is Stephen Miller. Okay, so, and Justice Alito. We need to start when we talk about birthright citizenship, we know it's in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court did what they were supposed to do. They don't get a medal, by the way. You know, people kind of analyze. No, they don't get a medal. It's in the Constitution. It should have been 9-0. Should have been 9-0. Okay? Let's just be honest. If they are doing their job as, you know, looking at the letter of the law and the Constitution, it should have been 9-0. But it wasn't. So here we go. This is my observation on this when it comes to birthright citizenship. Maybe we need to start raising up the curtain on some of the people that are making the statements and the judgments on birthright citizenship to find out what's really in your background, what's really in your family's genealogy and history. Maybe we need to, and I have another phrase, I'm not going to use it right now, but maybe we need to raise the curtain on that. Maybe we need to go back and see, was Justice Alito legitimately, you know, he was born here. His mother was born here, so that in New Jersey, I believe that makes the citizenship conversation be less of a concern that they would try to push on birthright citizenship. But his dad wasn't. So let's make an issue around, well, let's check in your background, Justice Alito. We have to fight this fight, a little, in my opinion, a little bit differently. We need to start asking people who are trying to push this narrative about birthright citizenship going away. We need to start asking them, all right, well, let me check your family out. How pure and clean did your family follow the rules? We can start with Trump. Let's look at Stephen Miller's family. You know, let's start to ask that question. I want us all, from this point forward, when it comes to birthright citizenship, when any person, period, says to you something like, well, you know, we got to keep those people out who weren't born here, who were born here, and that garbage, however they go down that path. Well, just stop and ask them, well, where is your family from? Do I know? Prove to me. Rather than us taking a defensive position, Mike, let's get the people who are coming at us with, well, where is your family from? How do you prove it to me? Prove to me that you know for a fact that you're not one generation here, luckily. Because see, they don't people who talk this garbage, they don't like it when you challenge their quote unquote Americanism and patriotism. They don't like that. So let's start to do that rather than defend birthright citizenship. Let's start attacking those who attack it and say to them, where are you from? When someone says, start now, folks. When someone says, go back home, go to where you come from. Start saying, well, where are you from? Where did you come from? How about if you go home? Let's stop taking up a defensive position on this, guys, and go on the attack mode with the people that are trying to say somebody's not from here. Because I think that the more we do that, the more we put them on their heels with this, the more we, you know, they say trigger the libs. Let's trigger the MAGA. Where are you from? Prove it. Prove it. You got proof? Show me. Show me your papers. Show me where your mom and daddy are from. I want to see. I want to know that your grandparents came here legally and are here legally. I don't know. You say that they were from Scotland, or you say that they are from, wherever. I don't know. Prove it to me. Watch what happens. Watch how they get defensive, Henry. Watch how they suddenly go, well, my dad was one of the people that. Prove it. And when I hear people talk, that person pulled himself up from the bootstraps and they built the business. Okay, well, what about before them? How do we know that their father and mother got here legally or are here legally? And they could be as blonde-haired and blue-eyed as whomever. Let's start that narrative today. Don't defend it. Attack it. There you go. I said I was going to poke the bear a little bit. Let's take a quick break, Henry. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. And now AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. Let's grab a couple of quick calls, Henry. Let's go to Adele. I think it's right, Adele. Good morning, Adele. Welcome to Choose Views.
Richard. Good morning, Richard. Oh, I only get to listen to you when I can't sleep. So you're on so early for me. But, Richard, 100% attack back. I personally try to use positive words in my communication like you. Though in this case, no. Anything they say, we can have a comeback. Per what you just said about citizenship, yeah, let's start with Trump. Let's just keep over and over. What about your family, Trump? Melania, what about your family? You're all immigrants. So just having that conversation about giving it back to them. I guess that's all I have to say.
But, first of all, Adele, thank you for your contribution. And you are spot on. Give it back. I mean, we can still remain positive and upbeat and forward thinking. In fact, it's our responsibility to do that. And part of that is to say, where are you from, player? Where's your family from, young lady? I want to know. Make them answer that question, Adele. I think it's almost our responsibility to do that. We should be asking the folks who are that, go back to where you came from. Okay, you start. You start.
Exactly. But that's on every subject. Like, for example, billionaires create jobs. No, actually, labor creates the jobs.
There it is.
Just coming back at them. We've just been too silent. So thank you. Yeah, we're going to start the Richard Chu messaging starting now.
Thank you, Adele. Listen, dear,
Richard.
have a great rest of the week. Appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
Adele is fired up, y'all, and she is ready to go. Let's read a couple of quick comments that we got. Nancy, we the people should be proud of our democratic republic, fight back tyranny and fascism, and not let Trump erase our amazing progress made in civil rights and in the last 100 years, i.e. women's suffrage, integration of blacks into the American dream, LGBTQ rights. Right on, Nancy. Let's see what Lois has got to say. Yeah, Lois has got some. Okay. What's interesting is that more GOP women who are married take their husbands' names than Democratic women. Plus, more single straight women and lesbians vote for Democrats. A SAVE Act could bite the GOP in the booty. She said behind, but I figured I'd be okay saying that other word. Let's see what we got from 630. Basically, yeah, there. Oh my goodness, Jill in Evanston. What we got from Jill? But my family came here the right way. Classic response. Oh, they did, really? Or that's what you were told. Your family's legend and myth. Right on, Jill. Jill doesn't play. None of our listeners play. Adele doesn't play. I want Adele on my team when it comes down to throwing political blows because she gets it right. Let's grab another quick call before we go to the top of the hour break. Let's go to Rick. Rick, good morning and welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
Well, you had talked about we the people.
Yeah.
Well, we the people have the right to do all these things, but our strength comes from God. It's not from us, because without Him, we are nothing. We are founded on the principle, when our country became a country, it was founded on God.
No, they're going to stop you there, Rick. It was not. All the religious scholars, all the constitutional scholars will tell you that that is exactly wrong. So I can't let you say that without pushing back. Our country was not founded by God or on God, godly principles. In fact, one of the big pieces of the country's origin was to provide a safe space for religious freedom. And it's in the Constitution that we won't create a singular religion for the country. So let me be clear. For those who are of faith and believe in God or believe in Allah or believe in Buddha, that is what the country, that's one of the original tenets, Rick, is that we had religious freedom. So to create a country that is based on God is dogmatic. That's not what we do. And I've got 3 professors that are going to be hanging out with me in the next hour, and each one of them probably know the Constitution chapter and verse. 2 of them have law degrees, and they will tell you that that's not accurate. It might be your opinion, which I respect, but it's not the truth about how our country was created or why it was created.
Well, if we in the Bible it says
the Bible's not the Constitution. We swear.
God's before our country. Before our country was, God was.
To those who believe that, then that's correct. But it was not the reason our country was created or how our country was created. You have to separate the two. There's a reason. You should read John Fugelsang's book, The Separation of Church and Hate. It is a very, very, and this is a man who was raised essentially in the church. I won't debate you on it, Rick, because I respect that you have your opinion in that space. What I would recommend is you get a copy of John Fugelsang's book and help you in that process. And I'm not taking away anybody's belief and faith. I'm a faithful dude. I believe in a higher power, without a doubt. But I know that the country's objective is not to, right now it might be, a lot of the Christian dogma is to say that this is a Christian country and it should be one that everybody yields to God. That's dogmatic. That's exactly the opposite. So I appreciate your call on that, though, Rick. Thank you for the call. We got to grab another one. Let's go to Troy. Troy, good morning, and thanks for the call. What's happening this morning?
Good morning, Richard. As I was never raised Christian anything. I think the first time I went to a Christian church, I was maybe 11 or 12.
What took you so long? You should have been there at 3.
Well, my parents were, my mom was a single mom. She didn't have time for church. My dad was out there doing the hippie thing. And, it just wasn't a part of...
I'm teasing, Troy.
Well, no, it's fine. I don't have any people who do believe, like you say, I respect that. But I myself, by the time when I experienced Christianity at 11, 12 years old, whatever that was, I absolutely found it, not to be disrespectful, but I found it to be almost ridiculous. I'm like, what? With already a view of scientific principles and understanding evidence and things like that, I'm like, what do you mean just believe? How do you believe? And anyway, it was a moral, ethical dilemma for a long time until I just came to terms with sort of being a Unitarian, which sort of I would, if I were to say I had a religion, I would say that I'm a Unitarian Universalist if I would put a label on myself, which I don't. But anyway, secondly, setting all that aside, by the way, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin all leaned Unitarians.
Yep.
Anyway, setting that aside, 2 weeks ago I had the the honor to participate in an honor flight with my dad with over 100 vets of Vietnam vets that were honored finally, after 50 years. This when we went to Washington, D.C., it was a formal thing. There was one in Chicago, too. It was a big, big, big thing. Hundreds of people, hundreds of volunteers. It was amazing. But anyway, as we were seeing the sites in D.C., the only thing that I can see, you drive by buildings and you can see where names are taken off and then Trump's name was put on there. I said to myself, it reminded me of a dog barking its territory.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing like fire hydrants. That's what it reminded me of. You're seeing, it was just so sloppily done and haphazard and.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's what I felt about that.
It's the Trump way, Troy. It truly is. But I appreciate you sharing with us your thoughts and your contribution to the show. Our listeners appreciate that as well. So
anyway, I'm a big fan, and I love what you do. So, and I love all your guests and everybody you have on. So it's all excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We appreciate it. You be safe. Be safe this weekend, Troy. Okay. All right. And stay hydrated, Troy. If you're out and about, if you're driving, y'all be careful and be safe out there today. We the people, there's so many. It actually gets into what's the word? The words I want to use. It's the Constitution's kind of sort of preamble. It's the way in which we, the people, have said, in order to form a more perfect union, and not to be someone that's trying to pretend to be scholarly when it comes to the Constitution, but anything ultimately that gets solved in a way that's right for the majority of folks starts with we, not I. And where we are right now, you see, I said where we are right now. Even when we're in problem, Henry, we got to figure this out. We are the ones that are in this craziness. But that's why I asked the question. And thanks to everybody that's responded this week with our question on Monday about 250 to 200, 200 to 250, and will we get to 300? And now we the people. So let's take a quick break. I am excited. We've got two of our great professors that are going to hang with us. Kevin Schultz, University of Chicago, Illinois, Chicago, and Jane Kirtley from the University of Minnesota. Wow. It doesn't get much better than that. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, 103.5 FM and 1520 AM in Warren County, North Carolina, and AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. Stay tuned because we got them coming when we come back.
He's not here to yell. He's here to inform and maybe stir the pot. This is Choose Views with Richard Chu.
All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. I'm Richard Chu if you're just tuning in. And yes, I have got a big old ladle and a lot of torque, and I'm stirring the pot this morning. I told you guys I was going to poke the bear a little bit on birthright citizenship as well as this conversation around, the Save America Act. Our next two guests, one you're very, very familiar with, and we're blessed to have him with us once again. But we got a new voice that's going to be hanging with us this morning. Who am I talking about? Professor Kevin Schultz, history chair at the University of Illinois at Chicago, who's been with us the last couple of weeks, helping us work our way through America at 250. And we get all these smart people with us today, guys. Professor Kirtley is not used to me, but I give my flowers in advance. And this morning we have Professor Jane Kirtley with us, who is a professor of media ethics and law at the University of Minnesota and former executive director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. So what are we going to talk about today, guys? We're going to talk about media and where our media has been, what it's come through, and where I think we might be headed. Professor Kirtley, good morning and welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Professor Schultz, welcome back. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I'm trying to avoid the heat as much as possible, but I'm doing all right,
So, Professor Kirtley, I'm making the assumption that you're up in Minnesota right now, and if you have you guys caught the heat wave too this week?
We have. It was absolutely stifling here on Monday. It felt like I was in Malaysia instead of Minnesota, to be honest with you. At the moment, it's about 71 and raining hard, but we'll see.
Yeah, you guys are a little bit west of us, so it'll probably it'll pass for you first. It'll cool down, then it'll cool down here. But yeah, I said to my wife yesterday when she got home from work, she's like, "Whoo!" And I said, "Yeah." And the thing is, you have to go outside because if you stay in the air conditioning all the time, and then you don't go outside, when you walk outside, it's even worse. So it's actually kind of a good idea, everybody. Just FYI, as a way of moderating modulating, I should say, your temperature, just in terms of staying hydrated. Go outside, get warm. Don't just stay in the air conditioning. It's the right way for your body to function. Anyhow, enough of my scientific, that word. Professor Schultz, tell us a little bit about your relationship, your time working with Professor Kirtley, and then we'll get into what is going on with our media right now, cases and just observations.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing in the heat is practicing what we're about to celebrate, which is the semi-quincentennial. That's the 250th anniversary. Semi for halfway, quin for 5, centennial for 100. So we're halfway to 500. So I'm hoping that we make it to 500 in our great democracy with all of its ideals that we're celebrating from the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Actually survive maybe another semi-quincentennial. We make it to 500. And one of the things that we've had throughout our history, as you well know, as a member of the press, is some relative freedom of the press. The ability for people like you and me and Professor Kirtley to criticize our government, to try and propose ways that they can reform and improve and enhance our liberties and our freedoms. And not all nations have that. And I do think it is one of the foundational principles that we have to continue fighting for in the United States. I think it's maybe under threat right now by what we're watching, not only with the actions of this sort of MAGA movement, but more damagingly, I would say, with a lot of the consolidation of media that we're seeing with the first trillionaire and the one percenters getting richer and richer. And they're buying up some of the landmark outputs of our press. And CBS and 60 Minutes is, of course, one of the most famous stories that we're all following, which was bought by Larry Ellison's son, who took his millions and billions of dollars to buy the media outlets, and he's trying to push that into a right-wing sort of sound piece. So they're taking these sort of foundational instruments of our press, which do a lot of the work that you and I get to talk about, because they're the ones who are digging into the Supreme Court cases. They're the ones that are digging into the corruption. They're the ones who are digging into the environmental damage. They're the ones who are, the press is actually doing all of this work, so they're trying to silence this. Now, as a historian, I can talk about the history of this. Of course, Jane is a lawyer and a legal scholar, so she can talk about some of the legal precedents today. But I will say, before I pass it off to Professor Kirtley, that in the United States, we do have a long history of advocating for the freedom of press. It's not a clear history. There are lots of bumps in the road. It even starts before there was a United States of America.
Yep.
One of the first sort of landmark cases, which you probably know about, concerns a guy named John Peter Zenger. Back when New York was a colony, the United States didn't even exist yet. And in 1735, he was a journalist, and this was an era of pamphlets and sort of newspapers. This was how word spread in the 18th century. And the governor, the royal governor of New York, again, this was before there was a United States. I always remember his name because his name was Bill Cosby. It was actually William Cosby, but it was William Cosby, but I remember it because it was Bill Cosby. And Bill Cosby wanted to steal the salary of his predecessor, another great named guy named Rip Van Dam. And so John Peter Zenger published all of this, and he was paid by some political enemies of Bill Cosby to publish this stuff. Bill Cosby threw him in jail. And one thing you know is that journalists have friends who are other journalists. So while he rotted in jail for 8 months, all of the other journalists talked about how unfair this story was. And so by the time he went to trial in 1735, 8 months after he'd been in jail, the jury acquitted him and said, no, he's just publishing the truth of what you want to do. And that set not a precedent, because there were no legal precedents because we didn't exist at the time,
Nope.
but a foundation for this notion that in the United States, we would have freedom of press, especially if you were preaching the truth. And that was enshrined in the First Amendment of our Constitution, which of course reads, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. Now, there are certain times when a government needs to abridge the freedom of the press in order to safeguard our democracy. And that's been the friction cases that have happened throughout the 19th and 20th century, throughout our great republic. Abraham Lincoln had to shut down the press sometimes, at least he felt he did,
Right.
in order to keep fighting during the Civil War. This happens, of course, during World War I era and all the way up to today in the Watergate papers and things like that, where Professor Kirtley is really an expert.
So, Professor Kirtley, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is Professor Schultz mentioned landmark events or landmark cases. What have been, in your mind, your experience, the most landmark, the biggest landmark cases, or I don't know if that's the right word to use, maybe most significant landmark cases in modern times that?
Well, I always talk in terms of foundational cases, because
Okay.
I think they lay the foundation from which everything else will grow. And when I do work internationally, and I do a lot of it, I always talk about basically two cases, two to three. The first one is Near versus Minnesota, which was right from here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, decided in 1931. A really important case because it established the principle that prior restraints on speech are presumed to be unconstitutional. It involved a newspaper called the Saturday Press, which by anybody's standards today was odious in terms of its anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism, anti-labor, you name it. But the thing was that they were taking on basically organized crime that was dominating the Twin Cities at that time. And what they were reporting was truthful. It just was incredibly embarrassing and expressed in very derogatory terms. So it was called a public nuisance under a regulation, and ultimately stopped from publishing, and beyond that told that if they wished to resume publishing, their copy would have to be approved by a judge. I'll cut to the chase and say the case eventually went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which in a divided opinion held for the first time that any attempt of the government to stop publication would be presumed to be unconstitutional. Well, what does that mean in practical terms? It means that unlike most other places in the world, instead of you as the speaker having to prove that you have the right to publish, it's up to the government to prove that you don't have the right to publish. And the court in what we call dicta, which is not binding law, but nevertheless is illustrative of examples, gave some examples of things that might justify a prior restraint. But in this particular case, they said criticizing what is truthfully wrong with the government in the Twin Cities does not justify that prior restraint. The case that everybody, I'm sure, knows that followed that many years later was the Pentagon Papers case, so-called New York Times versus United States, which involved an attempt of the Nixon administration to stop publication of the classified Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. And in that case, if you look at just the primary per curiam unsigned opinion, it's a very narrow ruling that simply says the government did not meet its burden in that case. The other opinions written by each of the 9 justices explored that in more detail, but I think the main takeaway is that, again, the government can't just say it's a national security problem. They have to show and prove that it's a national security problem to justify a prior restraint.
And also,
so that's the
and also
sorry.
what who the potential damage parties would be.
Exactly what the harms would be. And
Right.
in fact, one of the justices said, unless it's immediate and irreparable harm, it cannot be the grounds for a prior restraint. So tremendously important ruling, basically shifting, again, the burden of proof to the government, not to the speaker.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
Well,
I'll wait and then we'll come back.
Yeah, hold your thought right there, Professor Kirtley. We're going to take a quick break, guys. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, where Professor Kirtley's hanging out. I'm Richard Chu, along with Professor Kevin Schultz. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Chew's Views. If you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chew. We're talking with Professor Kevin Schultz from the University of Illinois in Chicago and Professor Jane Kirtley, Professor of Media Ethics at the University of Minnesota. Professor Kirtley, a couple of things that just to get your sort of media and law expertise or thoughts on. When we were going to break, basically what you were talking about is kind of editorial gatekeeping. It's a word I kind of, wrestled around in my head where, we're gag orders and gatekeeping and words that are designed to stunt the media's ability to report without any government entity getting involved to prevent them, unless it's damaging to, for lack of better words, the end user or listener or reader. How much has that changed? And let's just go back to the Nixon administration. How much, in your observation, has that changed?
Well, in some respects, everything old is new again. I think it's important to remember that Nixon had an enemies list, and his surrogate, Vice President Agnew, was really the attack dog overtly on the press and was out engaging in the kind of rhetoric that we hear today all the time from President Trump and his supporters. It's fake news. It's unpatriotic. They're just out to cause us trouble. J.D. Vance recently was talking about how the whole Nixon scandal would not have been a scandal today, and that Nixon was brought down by the deep state, so-called. Leonard Downey had an op-ed in the Washington Post the other day that essentially said, well, actually, it was the media and members of Congress who brought down the Nixon administration, which is not any definition of the deep state that we know. But I guess my point is to say there's no administration that likes to be criticized. There's no administration that likes the press to be uncovering what they're doing that's wrong, just as the local people here in the Twin Cities didn't like it. This is endemic. And so many people, when they're running for office, talk about how transparent or open, it was the term we used to use, their administration is going to be. But in my experience, within months, they will be retracting that and pivoting from that because they really want to control the message. And that's the magic word, I think, control. What we see with the current administration is that it has rolled back on freedom of information. It has shut down public access to government sources. If you look at government websites today, they look incredibly different than they did just a few years ago in terms of both the language they use and the accessibility that they have. So my point would be, nobody in government really likes the press. Even Thomas Jefferson rolled back his support for freedom of the press when he was in office. So in some respects, it's nothing new.
One of the things Professor Schultz said, I think about when I hear politicians of all levels say they're going to be completely transparent and open, going back to Professor Kirtley's comment a moment ago. I've for years said, don't say that. Say that you're going to be as open and as transparent as the matters allow you to be. And if I'm running for office, I'm going to say that because there are some things that we need to make sure that are right and vetted before we bring them to the public so that we get it right. I think that everyday citizens would appreciate that kind of clarity, that some things we aren't going to talk about till we have our ducks in order. What are your thoughts there, Professor Schultz?
I mean, that's pretty clear, especially if you're negotiating something, you have to keep your cards close to your chest. When you don't keep your cards close to your chest, you risk looking like an idiot, like our current president in his negotiations with Iran comes out and says what he thinks they agreed to. And then Iran 5 minutes later comes out and says, we didn't agree to that at all. And gas prices go up and down based on those tweets. I did want to push on one thing that Professor Kirtley said, because I think she really hit on something very important, which was, yes, of course, anybody in power does not like to have transparency, does not like to have the press poking around, even if they're people that we today might look up as heroes, like Abraham Lincoln, for instance. But she mentioned Spiro Agnew, the vice president during Richard Nixon's presidency for a little while until he was forced to resign for fraud and tax evasion reasons. Brown paper bags of money exchanging hands in the basement of the White House and stuff. That's another story. That's a fantastical story. But he really was tapped as Nixon's bulldog, and he came up with great names for his enemies and for the press, nattering nabobs of negativity. right? This famous line. He was an alliterative guy who loved these runs of phrase, and he was really funny and entertaining in some ways, but his words were really vicious. And more than just his words, what he was actually trying to do is create what he called effective polarization, positive polarization. And so he was actually looking at maps of the United States saying, we, the Republican Party under Richard Nixon, do not need to be unifiers where we bring together the country. Instead, we can create an enemies list and we can divide the country. Sometimes this is called Nixon's Southern strategy, although it extends more than just the South, and it extends more than pushing buttons that relate to race and the America's history with black segregation and things like that. But instead, he wanted to polarize the country between the South and the Midwest, leaving the coastal elites, as Spiro Agnew called them, to fend for themselves. You know, he often said, we don't want to win New York. We actually want to engage New York as an enemy so that we can win the South and the Midwest. And then we can effectively polarize the country and have what Kevin Phillips, their political strategist behind all this, called the emerging Republican majority, which is sort of the political foundation for what we've seen over the last 50 years. My point is this, that Spiro Agnew deemed the press to be the enemy that was part of this coastal elite. There was some latent anti-Semitism because the press was run by a lot of Jewish business people and press people. And ever since then, there's been this undergirding pushback, especially from the right, on the truth-tellingness of the mainstream outlets of the press. And that has only grown in the last 25 years with the diversification of media. And now today, it's kind of ironic that the right is trying to take over those mainstream media outlets that they say come from these coastal elites from places like New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco.
The crazy irony of all that is just palpable. Thank you for that, Professor Schultz. Professor Kirtley, as we wrap up in the last couple of minutes, and it's been great having you with us. My brain went like, okay, slow down, I can't keep up. But and I mean that in all due respect. It's like, oh my God, this takes me back to communications law and all of the rest. But to that end, media consolidation, what Professor Schultz just talked about in terms of what folks are trying to do, as best you can in the next minute or so, tell us why it really is a problem to not have diversity of media ownership.
Well, I guess I would say that diversity of media ownership is foundational because it guarantees that the public have access to a variety of sources of information and viewpoints. That may sound obvious, but the difference between a robust democracy and an autocracy is that you don't have any single voice providing you with information and news. The reality is that with the diversification of media sources, outlets, everything from conventional print media, broadcast media, cable media, digital media, we have more options and more choices than we've ever had in our lives. And to some extent, I think the focus on what we used to call mainstream media kind of misses the point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not suggesting that the New York Timeses or the NBCs are not important, but they are much less important as the kind of gatekeepers that I grew up with in the 1950s to the early 2000s. That's why it's so fascinating to me that Brendan Carr at the FCC is focusing so much of his attention on broadcast media, which have a smaller share of the market than anything else really in the mainstream media. But the point is this: we need to have a lot of different sources. We need to have sources that will challenge the conventional wisdom and certainly that will challenge the government, whichever government that may be. I'm not talking specifically about the Trump administration, but it's certainly true that this administration is seeking to ensure that its million and billionaire pals are the ones that are controlling the message, which means that the public is at a loss for getting reliable information, and why I think so many people are turning not only to unconventional media sources, individual independent journalists and so forth, but to international sources like The Guardian or the BBC, or if you have more language facility, other sources, because they don't trust what they're hearing within our domestic news sources.
I will agree with you in terms of the last a couple sentences about international or non-domestic media. Never before in my life have I turned to other than U.S. sources or U.S.-based sources to get other points of view, other observations in this space. Professor Kirtley, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I meant it, and Professor Schultz can back me up when I said my brain just like went poof, and let me hold on because it's just too much. But it tells me I need to be back in the classroom in a desk listening. Thank you for being with us, Professor Kirtley. I look forward to having you back again. I know our listeners will benefit from your knowledge and your expertise. Professor Schultz, hang tight. We're going to keep the train moving along. We're going to take a quick break. Professor Kirtley, once again, thank you for spending time. She is the professor of media ethics and law at the University of Minnesota and former executive director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us. We'll be right back. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM for Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. We'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. Thanks for being with us this morning, and thanks to Professor Jane Kirtley from the University of Minnesota for being with us to talk a little bit about press and freedom of the press. Also with us, of course, is our good friend, Professor Kevin Schultz from the University of Illinois, Chicago. The press is a tool of protest. I thought about this late last night. I was like, you know, that's one of the values of the press. It can be a use or a tool of protest. And our next professor with us this morning is someone who has had an illustrious career and is still fighting and protesting and providing us with tools for protesting in a way that are not just for the protesting for the purpose of protesting, but to be effective in that way. Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall is with us this morning, and hanging with me and Professor Kevin Schultz. A Protest History of the United States is her best-selling book that we've talked about before. It's been a few months since we've had Professor Marshall with us, but good morning, ma'am, and welcome back to Choose Views.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I feel kind of like, you know, I said this earlier, and I mean it. I need to be back in the classroom because, you know, because of Professor Schultz and the work that he's done and how he's been schooling us literally this last 3 weeks. And then to have you on this morning following Professor Kirtley, it just goes to show the importance of education. So there's my plug for you guys. But Professor Marshall, thanks.
Richard, I really think you use your platform here just to have some professors come in and put you back in the classroom where you really wish you were.
You know, listen, you and my wife don't need to talk because she's like, okay. But
I tell you what, I've had so many people come up to me and say, I wish I'd paid attention in school more because I love history now.
Yeah.
But in school, I hated it. I was not interested. I said, you just had bad teachers. So now Richard's finding all the good teachers and bringing them on his show.
Well, you know, the beauty of that is it keeps us humble because we can go, okay, I paid attention, but maybe I could have paid attention a little bit more. And I think that's probably true for all of us when it comes to learning something. And
like the word semi-quincentennial.
And when you said it, it's sort of like, you know, I'm on the radio, so I have to practice certain things to make sure I say them the right way. Like I rehearse your name, I know it, Professor Marshall. I say it a dozen times and make sure I get it out the right way. And that word is I'm not even going to try to say it. Professor Marshall, you want to try to say it since Professor Schultz is showing off this morning? Sequicentennial. See?
Semi-quincentennial.
She got it.
You got it. Well, Professor Marshall, one of the things that I really love about your work and love about your book is that it's a roadmap to tell folks how to keep fighting. And I've been talking about this forever. And certainly now with us being July 1st, I said, okay, guys, you made it through this first half of the year. We're still standing. And part of the reason we're still standing is because we chose to fight. And I think that you really kind of, you know, put the text to it literally about the importance of protesting and being effective. So tell us a little bit about what your 6 months of 2026 have been about in this space of protest. And then I'll have Professor Schultz talk about a little bit about the history of protesting in America.
Well, this has been a very interesting 6 months of 2026. I was ending my book tour, 15-month book tour, traveling around the country for my book, A Protest History of the United States, when I realized there was more I could do to put protest into the minds of people and help them recommit to the process of democracy and the service that it requires from us. And so throughout this time period, I would go through the Deep South and other places. I would see these plaques of people who died protesting, or people who were put in these horrible situations in Mississippi and other places from protest. And I decided they were martyrs and we should have an American Martyrs Day. And so from that moment going forward, from March, when I ended in Virginia, standing before the sign of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville, the young woman who was killed by white supremacists when he ran his car into a peaceful protest there in Charlottesville. And the moment I said, okay, I'm going to have some kind of recognition, a tribute to these slain activists, and I decided I'm going to call it Martyrs Day. And other people got on board with that. And July 5th became the day for Martyrs Day because that's the day of 1852 when Frederick Douglass gave his speech, What to the Slave was the 4th of July. And the protest is not to just sit back idly and watch fireworks on the 4th of July, but have the 5th of July be a moment when you take into account what people did protesting that gave us these rights from the inside of the country. So much is focused on what we did in domestic wars, in foreign wars, but we didn't talk about domestic wars and domestic battles, and whether or not it was the labor unions or the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the anti-war movement. There have been so many protests, and many of those protests, most of them I would say, resulted in slain protesters. And we have to recognize the sacrifice and the loss of life that has taken place in this country in order to move it forward in the area of social justice progressively, domestically. But so much attention is given to what happens in war outside of the country that we don't even take into account what it took for regular people to move this country forward within the nation. And protest is at the core of that, and the people who lost their lives need to be recognized. And so Martyrs Day became this cause celeb for me, and that's what I've been doing these first 6 months. I didn't know this was going to turn into that at all. I thought after this long book tour, I'd be able to sit down, rest, write another book, and I probably will be writing another book, this time a novel. But I am like the founder of Martyrs Day, and so martyrsday.us, because this is the first American Martyrs Day, so it's martyrsday.us is the website. And this is what I've been doing 24 hours, 7 days a week since March.
Well, okay, so I marry people up a lot, and I mean that in the most respectful of ways. This is where Professor Schultz, who's the author of Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, including White Liberals, this is an opportunity for two great authors, two best-selling authors, to take a historical perspective at the two things that you guys are really, really good at. And I see a phenomenal next book that is collaborative effort of the history of protesting and the martyrs that have, the folks along the way, Professor Marshall, that may have been forgotten because, we're always going and going and going. But Professor Schultz, chime in a little bit on what Professor Marshall said about not just the history of, but some of the forgotten folks along the way, those that, would be ones that would fit into the definition of martyrs.
Oh, sure. There's lots of them throughout American history. William Lloyd Garrison. I could go on and on. The Iron-Jawed Angels who are fighting for women's rights. It could go on and on and on. Since we're celebrating the semi-quincentennial, which I'm going to keep saying until I get it right, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I do think it's important for us to remember the founding documents which give us the right for peaceable assembly, which is the foundational legal justification for us to go and protest peacefully. And one of the things that I love thinking about are the martyrs. Maybe not the martyrs, but the people who actually got up every morning, like Professor Browne-Marshall, and she's sort of shocked that the protest has to happen every single day. We talked on Juneteenth, Richard, about Opal Lee and where this came from, and this teacher, who came out of the South, who wanted to celebrate, came out of Texas, of course, who wanted to celebrate Juneteenth, and she walked her 2.5 miles every day until we turned Juneteenth into a federal holiday. So there is this sense that we constantly need to be fighting and be protesting for what we think is right. One of the things that strikes me, and I have to be very careful about how I say this, one of the titanic battles in recent American history that we all know about is the civil rights movement. And one of the things us historians struggle with is that during the actual protests of the civil rights movement, there was all sorts of violence, no doubt, on lunch counters, on voting rights marches, but there weren't that many martyrs to cause the transformational change that happened in the civil rights movement, which was the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, several of the voting amendments of the Constitution, the Housing Rights Act of 1968. There were really a very, very small number of Americans who died. Now, I say that really quickly. I'm going to follow up by remembering all the thousands of Americans who were lynched leading up to the previous 75 years from the end of slavery to the beginning of the civil rights movement. So I don't want to short shrift all of those forms of protest, and then the daily violence and the horrible things that happened to women. So I don't want to shortchange that. But when it became an actual protest, the power of the ideas in the American past have such a magnetic appeal that things can change as long as there is a persistent protest that is both wide. Today we're seeing the No Kings rallies, and very narrow. We're seeing some of the ICE protests in the areas where those are hotbeds in Chicago and of course in Minneapolis. And as long as we have those combination of protests, I think the American ship can change course towards the arc of justice.
Yeah, Professor Marshall, hold your thoughts on that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about, how we maintain the energy that's necessary to keep forward in our protest. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM. For Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, I am talking with Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall and Professor Kevin Schultz. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. I'm Richard Chu. If you were just tuning in, hanging out with Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall and Professor Kevin Schultz. So, Professor Marshall, one of the things that I wanted to ask you regarding energy and keeping things moving forward is politically right now in the country, one of the big topics is how do we bring younger folks into the political conversation and bring younger folks into running for office, and that the Democratic Party specifically needs to be more energized with younger voices, younger people, et cetera. You know the story. Both of you have heard it, and I know you both have your thoughts about it. But when it comes to protesting, some people will say, and I don't agree with this, that, protesting's old. That's not something we do anymore, and, et cetera, et cetera. I know you hear this. How do you wrestle with that? And then what's your sort of, here's how we energize folks in general, young or old, to protest?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I was motivated to write a protest history of the United States. It began as this legal treatise in support of protests. And then I realized that not every protest has a legal case associated with it. And you can't really discuss the vibrancy, that energy, when you think about it, the fact that it makes no real logical sense for someone to think they can fight City Hall, for someone to believe that even though the laws say you cannot live in a certain place, you cannot go to a certain school, all these things are against you and people stand up anyway. So it doesn't make a lot of logical sense on its face. And going back to something that Professor Schultz says that has to be understood, that even though it might have looked like only a small number of people died, we're talking about a country that promoted itself as a shining light on the hill of democracy. And so the core hypocrisy of it all, that people had to die to just get these progressive, or now thought of as progressive, but get these basic human rights. And so when we think about young people and trying to bring them in, we have more young people running for office now. The issue is generationally, we're divided. So you have young people who are saying, I want my socialist democratic party to be in because they understand these issues and the regular Democrats don't. And that's basically saying the generational divide is there, that the old Democrats don't represent our issues anymore. We need a new brand of Democrats. In the end, we're under an authoritarian regime that wants to crush us all, whatever your party is. And they want to crush people in their own party. So I'm wondering, is this just part of the evolution in politics? The same thing happened during the Vietnam War, with people saying they're the younger people, we are the sand, don't trust anybody over 30. There's always this ongoing generational divide that will take place in a country, especially one as dynamic as ours. And so I think this is a natural evolution. I'm concerned because this period of time, is the time in which there are more generations, viable generations in our country at the same time. So I have a friend who's an activist and she's 100 years old. Wow. 100 years old and she's still an activist. So you have all of these different people communicating, but they're thinking, many of them, from the standpoint of their generation and how they want to communicate, what their ideals are, what they want from the country might be generational as well. But there's got to be people who can come and bring us together generationally, as opposed to we just want the young people to come in because young people are the future. We have to kind of think about what is necessary that young people are voting for. What do they need? What do they want in a candidate? And then we can meet those political needs, because you can't meet all of those needs, all those personal needs. Some people want to look at politics as a come to Jesus moment, that every time you go into the voting booth, something magical is supposed to happen. And it could. I don't know what you're doing in there, but it could happen. But I'm just saying, there's an expectation of especially the Democratic Party that is supposed to fix all of these things. And when people don't get that, they're disappointed. Younger people are sometimes more impatient, and so they want their fix now. And if they don't get it, they'd rather stay home. Why trust the system? What is the system? And we don't teach politics and government and civics in our high schools with the way we used to. So they may not even know what the system is. They just know something's not working. They want to point to particular politicians and say, you're the reason why. You have younger people coming in to the Democratic Party as politicians, but also seeking something that we haven't had the political leadership be wise enough or astute enough to explain. Yeah. And, they used to call him the explainer in chief when it was like the president, and whether or not Obama or Bill Clinton or whomever it may be. We rarely get that explainer in chief anymore, where people in political leadership can explain what your government can do for you. Ask not and all of that, what you can do for your government. And so younger people are asking, why should I do anything for my government? The government doesn't seem to be even taking me into account. It's disconnected from where the people are. And so when you have a big tent like the Democratic Party is supposed to be, then there are many more people to complain that the tent has holes in it and it's leaking on me. And why should I stay under this tent anymore?
Yeah. Wow. Professor Schultz, baton to you on that topic.
I want to put forward an argument, and I would love to hear what Professor Browne-Marshall has to say about this argument. The argument is that we right now are just watching a generational wake up. So I teach American history, and in my classes on almost every single lecture starts with a story, and usually it's a story of protest that leads to change. And one of the things that I discovered is that most of these protests started throughout American history started with young people. So I think about the Greensboro Four starting the sit-in movement in Greensboro, North Carolina. And that was 4 college kids, David Richmond, Franklin McCain, Ezeal Blair, and Joe McNeil. These are 4 college kids who come back from their winter break and they're mad that they couldn't get a sandwich at the rest stop because of segregation. So what do they decide to do? They decide to sit in at their local restaurants. Or I talk about the Vietnam War, and that was a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds showing up to protest the kind of machinations of the state that was pushing them into the meat grinder that is war. Throughout American history, we can go back and we can see all of these young people really being the motors of change. And the argument starts here. Starting in the 1970s, I think with Nixon, and we just talked about Spiro Agnew and Richard Nixon in the last segment, I think there has been a deliberate attempt by the Republican Party, generally speaking, to bleed cynicism to young people. Government can't really change effectively. Politicians are not out to do the common good. They're out to enrich themselves. They're only out to win elections. I mean, the winner of the Watergate debacle was actually the Republican Party that favored cynicism and small government. And that was such a successful argument that you get a guy like Bill Clinton, one of the most preeminent Democratic voices today, and he was the one who said the era of big government is over. And I think we've seen a generation or two of young people having a cynical view towards what politics can do. And I think that has led to a sort of decline in widespread protest that we're not seeing until we're seeing it reemerge right now. And I think right now we're watching a whole generation of young people want to get involved in politics. The system has been too broken. We need to get involved. I mean, just yesterday in Colorado, you may have seen this in the Democratic primary, a woman named Malat Quiros is 29 years old, the children of immigrants, and she just won the primary for a strongly blue-leaning Democratic House seat. So she probably will become a 29-year-old member of Congress. Now, she's emerging out of this democratic socialism or social democrat movement that we're seeing Zoran Mamdani and AOC, and of course, Bernie Sanders is the grandfather of this movement recently, I would say. And I think that's where a lot of these young voices are coming out of. But I want to say it's not necessarily because they are democratic socialists or social democrats, depending on how you want to word it. But I do think it is an arena that is allowing the youthful frustration, the youthful anger, and here's the most important part, the youthful issues of cost of living, of being able to buy a house, of being able to find a job that's going to have certain benefits that's going to enable you to take a vacation, take your family to the movies, things like that. They're speaking on those issues. So more than any party affiliation, left, right, whatever we want to say, when you speak about these bread and butter issues, and the young people in today's politics are, all of a sudden you can animate, and I'm going to argue reanimate, a movement of young people. And that's sort of what we're watching happen right now.
Yeah,
but you're the expert on protest.
Well, Professor Marshall, Browne-Marshall, you really touched on something a moment ago that I think needs to be certainly unpacked even more. And what we'll have to probably do is have you back on so we can talk about this. But that is that I've had 2 people that sent me texts as we wrap up this show today that the Democrats need to have more explainers to the body politic about what and how we operate and what civics means to us. I'm going to ask you that favor that we have some time to have you come back and talk about, where we go and better educating, our students, our young folk when it comes to how we're supposed to operate, what that thing really means called the Constitution and all the rest of them. But what can I tell you? There's never enough time. It just is. We have to make more time. I guess we have the time. Professor Marshall, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us this morning. I love your book, and I appreciate you taking some time to share with us this morning. Professor Schultz, as always, thank you. I'm going to give Professor Marshall the last half minute to just say her bid her bid to us real quickly.
Well, my bid is July 5th is Martyrs Day. This is the inaugural Martyrs Day. MartyrsDay.us is the website. And we're having events around the country. The National Martyrs Day is in New York City at historic Riverside Church. And this is a movement. Atlanta just became another event that's on the list at MartyrsDay.us. You'll see. And Look at the martyrs. That's American history. Those people who have died for American civil rights, social justice, and equality, they are American martyrs. And look at those faces and names. And tell young people, when you say somebody died for your right to vote, those are names and faces that you can give them. These are the people who died for your right to vote. So MartyrsDay.us, July 5th.
Fantastic. Thanks to you both for being with us, Professors both Marshall and Schultz. What a day. Thank you so much. Have a great, safe weekend.
Happy semi-quincentennial.
That's right. Thanks, guys, for listening to the show today. This, of course, is always Choose Views. And like I say, as every day, make sure to stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show. Take a deep breath and make your life count. We will see you tomorrow.